Good afternoon. My name is Angela, middle initial K, last name Durden, and this is the Constrained View.
Life is a funny old broad. She keeps you guessing.
Well, hello, everybody. It's been a minute since it was back in July when I recorded several things that are going to play out until February, but lots been going on. I mean, man, has a lot been going on in my personal life. And in a way, I'm kind of glad when things like that slow me down because it gives me an opportunity to pay attention to what it is I want to say or what it is I want to talk about. And I start up a Word document and I start making my notes. I've been working on this particular thing today. As you noticed, the title is I Feel, Therefore I Am Strong. No, I don't think so. There's a reason for that. There have been a massive amount of videos that have been coming up on YouTube about empaths. And empaths, I think, is the new cool thing to be. We'll get into that. But it got me to thinking about the focus of these people is that the act of feeling does not make one an empath, but empaths themselves, while they can be feeling, and while they do feel, they feel deeply. They usually don't feel deeply their own stuff, though. They feel deeply other people's pain. So the act of feeling itself is not a strength. It doesn't make you strong. But what has that got to do with Marxism? Marxism. Because that's been a huge deal also here in the last month. Establishing Marxism in other countries happens comparatively quick because of the lack of legal foundation of freedom. I'm reading some of this. It's my words. Doing so in the U.S. is much harder because of the Constitution, and most people know about the protections assured by it. Now, to be clear, from this point on in this video, and anytime I mention Marxism anywhere, here's what I mean by Marxism. Marxism is the umbrella name under which is communism, fascism, socialism, Democrats, Republicans in name only, also known as rhinos, social justice warriors, and all their offshoots, including those who wore pussy hats, Antifa, Black Lives Matter, atheism and agnosticism, Planned Parenthood, and any and all dictatorships, no matter how it's practiced or what it calls itself. It's all Marxism. And for Marxism to take root in the U.S., though, it meant a takeover rollout. It had to be a long game. You know, who was it back in the 50s? That senator. Everybody thought he'd lost his mind because he was on the commie hunt. He wasn't wrong, we now know. He wasn't going overboard. He was meeting strength with strength. But he lost that battle. But it was a good one. So for Marxism to take root in the U.S. meant the takeover rollout had to be a long game because they knew, given our Constitution, there would be people fighting against it. But they came to the conclusion that hard attacks weren't working as well. So they came up with another one. And it's one that was comfortable. It would make the citizenry comfortable, you see, with pivoting, with retreating, with regrouping. But always the Marxists kept their goal in mind. And their goal was to get everybody to accept their crap. Now, Marxism had to sneak into power by going around the natural, that is, the built-in human defenses against evil and perversion. Now, such natural defenses exist in almost all humans. So Marxism had to appeal to the act of caring, the act of caring. So Marxists incrementally ramped up the categories of naturally occurring caring that were based on truth and facts. And they did this by adding to and taking away until all that remained was what they had added. They did it ever so slowly and were so successful at it, they forgot themselves here in the last 8-9 years and went whole hog crazy with fast rollouts of nut job junk. Just nut job junk. They just acted too fast. But it's how we got the funding of and the marching in the streets for the right to gender reassignment surgeries and hormone therapies for children, and biological males pretending to be females and undressing in girls' locker rooms and getting their own little saluting the ladies, to marching naked in the street in gay pride parades in front of little children who pretend to be all sorts of things. My grandson had a great imagination. You know, when he was 3 and he'd go to the grocery store with me, you know, and he'd say, Mom, they called me Mom, because that's what their mother called me. Mom, can I go to the store with you? Yes, I'm going to bring my dog. Okay. And he didn't have a dog. So I would go to pick him up. He would have his hand holding the leash. He would lead his little doggy out, who was named. I don't remember the name. We would open the door. He would put the little doggy in. He'd make sure his leash was not inside the door when it closed. I mean, was not hanging outside when the door closed. He would buckle himself up, or I'd buckle him up, one or the other, and he'd make sure his doggy was buckled up too. And then we'd go to the store, where we would reverse all of that, and he would hold his leash the whole time we're going in and out of that store and doing grocery shopping. And then we'd get back to the vehicle, and they would hop. Now, this drove my daughter crazy. Mom, there's not a dog there. I said, I know that. It's called imagination. He's just imagining. Now, how did I know? Because there was no dog there. But did I cave to his absolute belief that there was a dog there because he believed it? Did I cave to that by buying dog food and putting it out for a non-existent dog? I did not. When he was 5, he also pretended to be a matchmaker for me after my divorce. The boy was something. He had a group of 12 men arranged on the wall. He knew their names, described their features, height, and weight, explained what each did for a living, then asked which I liked. I replied, not sure. Which do you recommend? He proceeded to walk to the wall and wipe away the ones he thought were not suitable and tell me why they weren't, until he came down to the best man for me, and dang if he wasn't right. Too bad the guy didn't exist. Now, you're saying, but Angela, he arranged them on the wall. Yes, in his own mind, they were arranged on the wall. I could see nothing. My granddaughter was sitting beside me going, and looking at me. We couldn't see anything, but in his mind, those things existed. Now, did I start advertising him as the matchmaker for everybody and pay me money and a 5-year-old will hook you up? No. But you see, children have imagination. Now, I can double guarantee you, if my grandson had said, hey, I'm a girl, there is no way I would have gone out and gotten him any hormonal treatments or had his little boy parts cut off and refashioned into a horrible semblance of little girl parts. There's no way. And yet, many parents do that. They take a naturally occurring imagination of a child, and because of outside pressure, they take it as a reality, and they hurt their children. And they do it in the name of caring, you see, caring. Because these Marxists have taken the ability to care in good, normal people and worked on them for so long and in such minute fashion that finally these good, normal people become not so good and normal. And they call it caring. Children whose caring parents think nothing about bringing their children to gay pride parades to watch naked men ride by on bicycles, or take them to libraries where males dressed as prostitutes read little kiddie stories. Males dressed as female prostitutes read little kiddie stories about the joy of sex with whoever and whatever and however. And if someone speaks up and says, none of this is good, and they don't agree perverted treatment is good and right, then that person is doxxed, treated as a leper, fired from their jobs, has their parental rights taken away from them, called a Nazi who simply does not care enough, and boom, canceled. Unless they shut their mouths shut and they obey their Marxist overlords, since receiving that punishment is not worth the saving of the child. See how that works? Back in the 50s and 60s, with the discovery of formulation of certain drugs, this is how it started. Psychiatric hospitals began releasing patients with mental illnesses, all in the name of caring. In the 70s, politicians defunded those hospitals and kicked out the mentally ill. At that time is when homelessness began to grow aggressively. Politicians talked about freedom of choice for these people and how important it was, all in the name of caring. Back when my kids were still in elementary school, and I was still married, we were all at a Wendy's, and there was this man walked in. He was in ragged clothes, and he was barefoot, and it was at least 30 degrees outside. My kids and my husband and I, we both went, oh, what can we do? How can we help him? You know, he doesn't have any shoes. He was holding his pants up. Didn't he have a belt? Huge pants. He was holding them up like this. His shirt was torn. His was filthy dirty. Filthy dirty. Young man, I would say no older than 30. My husband said, I've got a pair of really good shoes out in the vehicle. I think it'll fit him. Why don't you go get them? I said, okay. So went and got them, thinking this was a good thing to do, to help, to show we cared. Went and got the shoes, brought them in. And I said, sir, I think these shoes will fit you if you would like to have them. He looked up from the table where he was at. He said, do I look like I need shoes? I do not need shoes. Who are you to think that? And he went on and on and on. And, obviously now we knew he was mentally ill. He wasn't down on his luck, as they say. He was mentally ill. Well, can you use a coat? My husband said. The man said, do I look like I need a coat? Up from the table he jumped, and outside he went. And for the next 3 months, he walked up and down in a main drag of Stockbridge, Georgia, from the Wendy's down to the Walmart, back and forth. He lived under a bridge. He would not go anywhere else. He would not take any donations to help him stay warm. He was perfectly fine. So we named him Stockbridge Man because we didn't know anything about him. Nobody knew anything. But this man was not doing well. And I hope that when he disappeared, that he disappeared into somewhere, a hospital environment with a lockdown unit where he could be warm, get food on a regular basis, and maybe get on some medicine that would help him to be able to take care of himself. Now that's caring. So anyway, in the 70s, the politicians defunded all that, and they did it in the name of caring, you see. They took away the safety nets that were in place, and they threw these people on the streets. Now, granted, there were some of these institutions that were absolutely horrible. They should have been shut down, granted. But there were some others that were very good and doing their very best, and they were horrified when they had to put these people out and their places were shut down. I remember all this happening thinking, this does not make sense. Who would do this? Well, it was a bunch of politicians, most of whom were Marxist, quietly. And the others who had been tricked into thinking that this was a caring thing to do. And they reveled in their caring. While our streets have done nothing but be on a steady march to becoming encampments for the homeless who are unwilling enough to remember to take their meds if they even ever want to, because when they're off their meds, they don't want to, because they don't need it. See, you're the crazy one, not them. Anyway, this was all a Marxist ploy, pure and simple. Now, the next thing that came along around the same time was a book. It was written in 1967 by a psychiatrist by the name of Thomas Anthony Harris. His book was I'm Okay, You're Okay. Now, you've heard that phrase before, I'm okay, you're okay. If you want to learn about what the book was about and all that sort of thing, you can go to Wikipedia or just go to any like Google or something like that, or Bing, type in I'm okay, you're okay book. And one of the links will be to Wikipedia. Very interesting stuff about that. But I never liked the concept of that book, the title itself, I should say, because it wasn't true. We'll get into that. This came out in 1967. It is still being sold to this day. But in the late 1990s and the early 2000s, I knew a man whose psychologist had him read that book. He said, this will do you good. This man had been in the Vietnam War. He was extremely smart. Invented something. I'm not going to tell you what, because if I told you, you would start to know who he is, and I'm not going to do that. Made a boatload, a shipping container full of money. Had a wife and 3 children. He used drugs. He used alcohol. He had some major issues. And so his psychologist said, here, read this book. What my friend got from it, he and I got in a conversation one day. He was all enlightened now, and after having read it. But all he got from that book was that we all have our different problems to overcome. But even with those problems, I'm okay. And you are also okay. And there's nothing wrong with us. And we have to accept each other. He came to believe that mindset was a caring one because it did not involve any exposing of shortcomings nor the working on those to their betterment. You see, I'm okay, you're okay meant he could accept himself for what he was, and he worked mighty hard on caring for himself. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that to a point. Even Jesus said to love your neighbor as yourself. And if you cannot love yourself, then how can you love your neighbor? Taken to the extreme, though, that type of caring is completely inward facing, focusing entirely on the self. How does it make me feel? I'm okay. I see that you're okay, so you must see that I'm okay. And if you don't see that I'm okay, well, there's something wrong with you. That's how that whole thing started getting turned around. Working on a part of the population that could support themselves, but cause chaos in other ways. So how does it make me feel is the question. That question has nothing to do with the other person. It's a thing one does to serve one's own ego. Truth and facts are not part of the situation. My friend, while claiming he was working on himself, was in fact not willing to face his shortcomings. He thought merely being open about them was the thing to do, and he wasn't truly open. I can tell you that. I knew his wife and I knew his children. And let me tell you, they were suffering. And the kids, as soon as they could get out, they did. And the wife, she just said, well, where was she going to go? On the other hand, true caring always asks what is best for the other person in the situation in which they find themselves. You see the difference between how does it make me feel and what is the best for the other person in the situation they find themselves? See the difference between the two? One is inward facing and the other deals with truth and facts as part of the situation. It is this true caring that produces tough love. Now, divorcing my husband was me showing tough love to him, because simply showing him I cared by doing what he wanted, finding out what he needed, somehow helping him get that, was not making him any happier. It was definitely not making him a better husband. Maybe we'll get to that later. Still, choosing truth over the lie is always what must be at the very core of anything that is called caring. When you start truly caring about people, when you start truly caring that they need more information based on truth, then you start leaving behind friends and relatives and workmates and loved ones when they decide to continue to believe the lie over all evidence to the contrary. See how that works? And next thing you know, you wonder, geez, I wonder what happened to all these people. Well, I'll tell you what happened to all those people. You took yourself out of their orbit, and they were unwilling to follow you into a new orbit because they were mad at you or thought you were a nut or whatever. But you were not supporting their lies. You actually, by taking yourself out of their orbit, had given them an opportunity to hear the truth of why you had chosen whatever it was you chose. It could be a religion, it could be a divorce situation, could be a career type situation. Why did you take yourself out of this? Well, let me tell you why, you say. And they don't want to hear it. This is not your problem. But it's not new. Jesus said he came to put a sword upon the earth. Now, if you want to make a note right now, I will tell you, you don't have to make a note if you don't want to. Everything that I've got here is printed out. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to put it in the show notes. And that's for Substack. And once it gets to YouTube, I'm also going to put the whole thing in the show notes there, or the information block. And you can find it there. But if you want to make a note right now, Mark chapter 10, verses 32 through 37. Whole thing is really good. But I'm going to focus right here on verse 34. Verse 34 says, "Do not think I came to put peace upon the earth. I came to put not peace, but a sword." Now, this is the opposite of what Marxists say. Marxists say, well, your Jesus would never do that when it comes to showing tough love. Yes, our Jesus would do that. Plenty of times in the Bible, when he was on earth, walking amongst men, talking to them, dealing with the Sadducees and Pharisees, he showed tough love. Because he cared for others on the basis of truth and facts. He wants his followers to do the same. Now, when one accepts the truth of a situation and changes their actions with reality, relatives and friends and workmates often do not like it and they get mad. This is the sword Jesus was referring to when he said, "Do not think I came to put peace upon the earth. I came to put not peace, but a sword." It isn't because Jesus wants to cause problems. He knew that accepting truth would cause problems. And he knew that because he spoke truth, this would cause battles in families, in nations, and all that sort of thing. Jesus knew that Jews who had accepted this new reality, that the Messiah had arrived and prophecies were now fulfilled, would cause great division amongst the Jews, and it has. In point of fact, most all in the Jewish faith to this day still wait on Jesus to arrive as the Messiah, although there are some Jews for Christ who have recognized that he came already and that the prophecies were fulfilled. Anyway, those Jews back in the day when he was on earth who accepted that Jesus is the Son of God and the Messiah, and that he had arrived right on time according to prophecy, were persecuted by other Jews, family members, Sadducees and Pharisees, and political leaders. So Jesus spoke a universal truth. Truth divides people into two categories. Those for and those again. Truth conquers the lie when it differentiates between those who believe the truth and those who stick to the lie. Peace through strength is based on the truth of a situation. In other words, wishing and hoping don't stop wars or bad people from hurting innocents. They don't. That is why caring without responsibility always fails. And you can look at Washington, D.C. Caring without responsibility fail. Chicago, Detroit, Los Angeles, California, New York, oh gosh, certain parts of Atlanta, Georgia. There's all kinds of different places just in the U.S. alone. Caring without responsibility towards the truth of a matter rarely turns out well. In fact, you know what? It never turns out well. Feeling a thing is not an action taking. It is merely an emotion. Emotions, excuse me, emotions are just merely that which you feel. You cannot put your hand on them. You cannot, they're not real. They're things rolling around in your head, making you want to act a certain way. But Marxism, and this is very interesting, Marxism made people think that feelings are real. They made them think that they do matter. Your feelings do matter. No, they don't. Feelings don't matter. And they don't make you strong when you give vent to them for no good reason. Humans must be challenged to improve. Challenge requires the obvious. Seeing the issue, identifying the fault at the heart of it, then taking decisions and making moves to address that. Challenging requires long-term strength. Which brings us back to my divorce and why it took so long to finally happen. In the show notes, I'm going to link a episode on YouTube of Star Trek, the episode about the empath. Some of you may remember it. Some of you may not. I remember as a kid watching that. Now, when I watched it, I said, my stepfather, my mother, none of my siblings understood what was going on. They said that this is a really weird show, this particular episode. They love Star Trek. And I was sitting there watching the whole thing and going, oh my God, this is absolutely brilliant. But I didn't understand why I understood it. I was only 8 or 9, something like that when I watched it. But somehow or another, I was in my early 50s and I had divorced my husband, and I was attempting to answer the question of how did I end up here? Well, that entailed a lot of introspection, and it, searching on my soul and all that sort of thing. You get the drift. Then I saw the empath again. It just popped up. You know how those things do. Man, the sun has moved around, and I've got to get this not shining. It gives me a headache. The empath's name, Kirk named her Gem, Gem. And he noticed that she chose to put her own safety, health, and even her life on the line for others. In other words, she volunteered to put herself at risk to save others. Now, empaths are not the only ones who risk their lives and otherwise put themselves on the line to help others. Around the world, first responders do it every day, as do soldiers and ER personnel and just regular citizens who see an emergency and jump to help. But those are jobs, or those are just a random type of thing that happened. These people go home at the end of their shifts or at the end of the emergency situation. They take vacations from the stressfulness of their jobs. But empaths cannot leave themselves. Being an empath is not what they do. It is what they are. There are those who want to be an empath. That's why on YouTube there's tons of these videos. Suddenly, it's, like I said, cool to be an empath. But no matter how hard one wants it, one cannot become it. Empaths simply are. So my marriage lasted as long as it did, and to the outside world seemed to be successful because I was able to tolerate, even take responsibility for the imperfections of my husband. I was willing to believe what he said, that whatever problems we had were because of me ignoring my imperfections. And I worked very hard to be perfect. I was unsuccessful because, nobody's perfect, number one. So to believe that I could was a lie that I was telling myself. But also I had no self-respect. I was not someone who was comfortable with being treated well, because I knew that if somebody was treating me badly, there was something wrong with them, and I would take on that pain and I would make them feel good. And it is not a pleasant place to live, I can just tell you that. But anyway, there comes a time when empaths without self-respect are just voluntary victims. And that's what I was. I was a voluntary victim. And all because I felt like I had to. I am an empath. I feel others' pain and I want to help them get rid of it. Wasn't working. So the divorce finally was finalized. Tough love, baby. let me tell you. But this took my husband by surprise because he'd always managed to gaslight me into doing his bidding. And when I would try to read his mind, I twisted myself up into the craziest emotional, spiritual, and mental pretzel you ever did see. I mean, I was a mess. I was a mess, emotionally, spiritually. What was that other thing? Emotionally, spiritually, and mentally. And I had gotten to the point where I could not tell myself lies anymore. And when I stopped, it became untenable. The marriage was untenable. Now, when they're young, empaths do not understand what about them causes people to be drawn to them. My first experience with people being drawn to me was, in fact, my stepfather. I was 2.5 when my mother met him. 2.5. And I had been sitting on a sofa and I went to sleep like little kids do. And when I woke up, there's this man sitting beside me and I'm leaning over on him and he's got his arm around me. And I knew as soon as I woke up that I was in the presence of something bad. I now realize that I called it evil, that I was experiencing my first brush with evil. Didn't know the word back then. I just knew I was in danger. And so was my mother, and so was my sister, who was sitting on his lap. And she was 15 months younger. She was like, oh, she was making nice with him and everything. But it was me he was obsessed with until he died. I began screaming and fighting for all I was worth to get away. And my mother, my stepfather, who later became my stepfather, he goes, what's going on? Looks at my mother, and my mother goes, I don't know. She's never done this before. And she says to me, I'm still fighting and screaming. She goes, Angela, stop. And I looked at her and she goes, please be nice for me. Now, that was my first empath moment, if you will, that I remember, I should say. And he was, until he died, he obsessed over me, and there was a lot of stuff that went on. I'm not going to go into it today because it doesn't matter. But the next one I remember, I was 5. Big party was going on. You know, there's a lot of drugs and booze and stuff like that. And I was sitting on a sofa, my little legs dangling off the side. And there's this woman sitting beside me. And I remember looking at her and going, uh-huh. Oh, really? Uh-huh. As she told me a horrible tale of her life and how she doesn't know how to get out of it. And I gave her advice. Okay, I was 5 years old. I heard this whole woman's story in the middle of this crazy party. There was just this little island that we were sitting on, this little sofa of calm. Uh-huh. Oh, really? Oh. And this woman, this grown woman, is pouring out her heart to me and asking me to figure it out for her, and I did. Well, as far as a 5-year-old's knowledge could go, whatever it was, she said, I never thought about that. Oh, you are so brilliant and smart. Whoa, that is a big thing for a kid to hear. Let me tell you, you are so brilliant and smart. No, I was 5. But that shows how she felt comfortable telling me all this stuff. And I had some good advice for her. I don't know if it ever worked at all or if she even remembered it. For all I know, she could have been high. I don't know. These types of things have happened my entire life. Total strangers walk up to me on the street and go, I don't know why, but I feel like I must tell you, da 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 da. It's tiring. It's really tiring hearing all these things. But the reason it was tiring is because I was taking responsibility for fixing it. And I have worked really, really hard on simply listening and asking questions or saying, I'm sorry, I don't have any advice for that. I don't know what to do. Because what I have found is that the more questions you start asking, the more excuses they start making for themselves. They don't want help. They just want somebody to validate them. They want somebody to say, well, I'm okay and you're okay. No, they're not okay. So the psychologist Carl Jung, is that his name? Carl Jung? He said the brighter the light, the more darkness is attracted. And I was a bright light. I still am, but not because I want to be. I go out in public, people, my cousins, my daughter, my friends that I go out with, they go, why are people always looking at you and smiling? Why do you get good service at a place? Why do people come over and talk to you and they don't talk to me? And I can't. I just go, well, what I tell them now is, I go, well, my DNA spins really fast, and it's the vibes, man. Vibes are real vibes, man. And they go, oh, okay, so it isn't their fault. But those who target empaths as objects to be controlled or destroyed, they themselves even don't know why they do it. All they see is an eager target, an easy target to get what they want. Now, often empaths discover there's a name for what they are later in life, as I did when I was in my 50s. As soon as I did some research into that, I went, this totally explains my entire life, and how people react with me, and that sort of thing. But there's one thing about empaths that their users and abusers and gaslighters never see coming about them. And that is the end of their abuse. So when I told my husband I was divorcing him, he flat out did not believe it. I mean, he did not believe it. He said, you're just messing with me. You got a game going on. No, it wasn't a game. Even as I put together a spreadsheet, and I did, this spreadsheet was a thing of beauty. It listed literally everything we owned, what its value was, and the 50-50 split of it, or if it belonged to one person or the other, they would get 100%, to one or the other. 8 months before the court appearance, even as I was cleaning out and packing up my home office, even as 7.5 months before the court appearance, I had him sign the legal papers the court required. And 7 months before the court appearance, even as I bought a used travel trailer to live in, had it refurbed, and moved out. Even the day of being at the courthouse, sitting in the gallery waiting to be called. And 4 months after the divorce, when I bought a small fixer-upper condo and moved 45 miles away, and months and several years after the divorce, when he sent emails and texts and left phone messages about how I would never make it on my own and would be coming back because I was nothing without him. Now, there would have been a time I would have believed that. And I would have believed it because it was easier to believe that of myself by excusing his actions because he was in pain, and take on that, than it was for me to believe the truth. But there comes a point with all true empaths those born this way, that you go, doesn't bother me anymore what you say about that. He thought I was playing a game with him, like you always did with me. And he was absolutely gobsmacked when he suddenly realized he had lost me for good and that I had treated him well in the divorce, which, by the way, I didn't have to, but I did. He ended up telling our son, he said, I've been talking to other men and what their wives do to them when they get divorced. Your mother actually was quite fair with me, and I don't understand why. And you know what else? Before I moved out, we had this one of those box freezers, kind of a large one, because I would cook ahead, and save it up. And we were always taking things to people who were sick and all this sort of thing, and funerals. And I had purchased these things that I knew would be easy to heat up and were high quality things for his breakfast. And I stacked them all in this freezer. And I said, okay, look, I'm heading out the door. Okay, I'm heading out the door to leave for good. And I go, let me show you one thing. And I take him out to the garage and I open the freezer and I go, look, here's the stuff for breakfast that you like. And here's some things very easy to fix for dinner, very easy to fix here. And here's some snacky things, blah, 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 all in the freezer. And he's just staring at it. And then he stares at me and he goes, I don't understand. And I go, well, it's so you won't starve. And then I took him inside. I said, okay, now here's the coffee. Here's the coffee maker. You know how to use it. The paper cups with the lids are over here so that when you leave in the morning with your nicely warmed up breakfast sandwich, you can take your coffee with them. All have the stuff I used to do every morning. He said, I don't understand. Why would you do this for me if you're divorcing me? I said, I know you don't understand. So after several years of being divorced, it hit him hard. It hit him really hard that I wasn't there anymore. But I didn't care. I no longer cared. Now, I care about him as a human, but I didn't care about making it easy for him. So when empaths make up their mind, they make them up hard, and there is no budging. There's no budging them ever again. Just like that. They break away and they never look back. And I haven't. And I know other empaths who haven't. They just don't. And why? Well, it's because they've given all they had to give and got tired of sacrificing themselves on the altar of lies. What's the point? Now, as a natural born empath, is there any other kind? It's in my nature to study a situation in order to best handle it. And I will say that from the time I was, 2.5 with my 2.5, 3, right in there with my mother and her new boyfriend, who became a stepfather. I studied my stepfather and my mother, and I knew exactly what made them tick. I knew when something was getting ready to happen. I knew how to stop my stepfather, from beating people when I was there. I knew how to redirect his anger if I walked in on a situation and it was already going on. I knew how to do that. And when I was 9, and I couldn't answer this question at all, when I was 9, he had been wailing away on somebody, my mother, I think it was, and everybody was all upset and running around like chickens with their heads cut off, as people do in bad situations like that. And I got between my stepfather and my mother, and I said, well, I had got him to look at me, and my mother just backed away, and I got him to look at me, and I was listening to him, and I go, really? Tell me what's going on. What's so upsetting? Tell me. And I just kept like that. And he did. And he started pouring out his heart. And I gave him the sympathy that he so badly needed. Till finally, we're sitting on the sofa, and I'm just still listening to him. And then he says, how do you do this? I said, do what? He said, how do you get me to stop from doing these things? And I said, I don't know. And I didn't. I did not know. But now I know, because I look back, I systemized everything that happened in that family with every single person. I knew what every single person would do. Could tell from just the tilt of their head, how they were holding their hands, that it was getting ready to set off my stepfather. I knew it because I paid attention to every little thing. So I also knew from how he would sit, how he would breathe, how he would move his fingers, what mood he would be in, and who was going to be the target. I was the memory of the family. I remember dates, places, who said what, why they said it, what happened to them, and to whom, and who was in the room at the time. Because these things told me something about how to manage the situation. I became whatever my stepfather needed to get his attention onto me and allowing others to be safe. Now, I never used any of this information that I had gathered to hurt anyone. I wasn't a narcissist or a sociopath or a psychopath or anything like that. It was all recorded, systemized, stored in my brain, easy to get to. And what was amazing to me was that my siblings and my mother never picked up on any of it. In fact, after he died, I thought, oh my gosh, I remember talking to my mother right after he died. I said, well, at least the abuse has stopped. She says, yes. But she gave me this look, and I went, I wonder what that means. Come to find out, none of them really remembered the abuse. All they remember is me being mean to them. Of course, they didn't know I was mean to them because my stepfather said if I didn't do it, he was going to beat them harder. So I would say, you got to do your chores. You got to do your chores. You better do them. And when they didn't, I would do them so they wouldn't get beat. And I would say that they did them. And I was the one that was mean. But as an adult, trying to understand all that, trying to always be on deck, I've had to learn that this is not a good way to live. It's not a good way to live for anybody, for the recipient of my caring, or for me. It's just not good. And when I got married to my husband, because he was not overt it wasn't a physical abuse that he did. It was a completely different kind that my stepfather had no clue how to practice. And that was the gaslighting stuff. It took me a really long time to start figuring this out. So when empaths say enough and I'm out of here, they mean it. And there's no going back. No going back at all. And one thing that that really bothered me a lot was that by continuing to sacrifice myself on behalf of others, and I'm not saying this in a holier than thou kind of way, it was just a reality. I found that I was getting further and further away from my Heavenly Father. And I really, really needed him bad. And I'll tell you why I was getting further and further away. It's because I kept believing the lies that were being told. And Satan's the father of the lie. No wonder I was getting further and further away from God. I cannot solve problems for everyone. I know. You're shocked. But it's true. I can't. And to continue to believe that I can is just a lie. And I no longer believe that about myself. Now, practicing it, because one does get into habits, practicing it has been tough. But I have accepted my limitations, and I'm working hard to not automatically get back into the old ways of doing things. So I got rid of what was keeping me from my Heavenly Father, and I've slowly built a relationship with Him. I am becoming what He wanted me to be all along. Now, there's a whole lot more on the subject of an empath, and Carl Jung, you can read him, but I won't go into all that. Suffice it to say that I pretty much can tell immediately upon meeting someone what they want from me. I never mention it to that person or to anyone else. I always let them make known to me what they are, because when the person is a bad person, I hope I'm wrong, and I give them whatever time or effort they need to prove me wrong, because obviously people can change their actions. But I'll tell you, I've never been wrong. When I meet someone and boom, it's clear. Boom. It's always clear. Always. I've never been wrong. So if they're a bad person, and I know they are, I still give them opportunity to prove me wrong. Because if I ever am wrong about someone I meet, about them being a bad person, or thinking they're a good person when they're not, in a way, that's like a lot of people. I would be more like a lot of people. And I don't mind that. I really don't. It's an easier way of living. But all this cataloging of everything and wishing and hoping does not get anything done well. Now I simply avoid them. Whereas before I would give them several years to prove me wrong. The whole time I'm going, up there it is, up there it is. Now it got down to like a couple of hours. Now it's 5 minutes. Yeah, I'm just not going to be available for you. Whatever you need me for, that's it. And really, they go, because in their heart of hearts, abusive people are lazy. They want the easy, low-hanging fruit they can use and abuse. They have to work too hard for it. It's not fun anymore. So when they cannot easily manipulate me or quickly and conveniently, make me jump through their hoops, they remove themselves from my life. And I know my weaknesses. I'm every day. They say the older you get, the less you know. And it's true. Because the older I've gotten and the more I've learned about myself, the more I realize I don't know about myself. So I know my strengths. I know when I overuse them, and I'm working on that too. I know what nature passed on to me. That's my DNA. And I know how I was raised, thus the nurture, modifying my nature. I know that too. But the strongest is free will. Of the three, the strongest is free will. Because when you choose to live without the lie, it takes a lot of strength, especially when your nature and your nurture is screaming at you to do something else. Empaths never make excuses for themselves. They always make excuses for others as they sacrifice themselves for them. And when empaths finally accept the truth of their voluntarily being abused, that it isn't helping anybody, they simply quit the relationship. Empaths are not cold. We're not cold. We are, however, practical. And in that practical comes freedom and peace. Even in the midst of the swords coming at you, there is a peace in knowing that you are living the truth. So, to that end, let me say goodbye. And we'll see you later. And yeah, bye.
She treats you right.